Eddie Van Halen here, telling you, keep playing, man. Gotta keep playing. It's the only thing there is. Music, man. Keep playing. All right? I'm gonna come looking for you if you don't.
You think if I'm going to play it, I could at least play it right? Let's start over. Let's get on up. Let's get started. We have got a great TransTrem Thursday for you tonight. Woo, man, I'm excited. We have information overload tonight. We have got Natalie, we've got Andy, And we have the whole OU crew here tonight. So let's get everybody in here. I think we got the first person at the bell. Let's see who we got. We have Symmetry Trev. Welcome in, man.
Hey, everybody. I love that song, man. Every time.
Man, I'm finally getting into the groove of that. I just got to learn that solo for it, and we'll be all set with that one.
Sounds great, brother.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you. It is such, a joy just to keep, just to play this thing.
Yeah.
And anybody new to the show, I think that everybody here would probably understand what TransTrem Thursday means. Got a Steinberger GL2T with a TransTrem on it. We start out, we play some of my favorite TransTrem riffs, and we talk about Steinbergers, talk about guitars, talk about anything. And tonight, we are full Steinberger overload with Andy and Natalie. So let's get started. Let's see who else we have in here. We have Mr. R2R3.
Yo,
Good to see you, man.
thank you. Good to see y'all, man. I'm happy to be here.
I've kind of forgotten what you look like on a Thursday night.
Yeah, man.
Welcome
I am
in.
excited. Thank you.
Awesome. Great to have you here, man. Great to have you.
Thank you, brother.
You been doing well? Doing okay?
Doing all right, man. Can't complain, and especially seeing who we have here tonight. Mm-hmm. This is exciting.
We've already got 40,000 watching, so I think those numbers will continue to go up.
It's going up.
Right on.
All right. Let's see who else we have here. We have Mr. John DeShane. Welcome in. So I understand that you have a new little toy. Did you want to talk about that for just a minute?
I do. Well, maybe I won't. We'll let that go.
Not just yet?
We'll let that pass.
Okay.
I gotta say that D every time
The,
in that song.
are you saying, John, are you saying that you like the D? Is that what you're
I
saying?
do like it.
John likes the D. Let's give him the D. There's the D.
Thank you.
All right. So without any further ado, I say we get our guests in here and we get started for tonight. So let me get ready here. We'll move over to this and we'll get first in. We have Miss Natalie Thayer from Headless USA.
Hello.
Welcome. Always a pleasure to see you. Great to have you back tonight. And
Good
welcome.
to be here. Thank you.
What is new in your world? What's been going on?
Well, I have a double neck to show you guys tonight,
Nice.
Nice.
and we just got a custom painted GM7 to show you.
Very nice. I got
Nice.
a little sneak peek of that. You have it on reverb already?
No, this is actually a customer's guitar that we painted.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, not for
So
sale.
I guess it was Instagram that I saw it. So, or at least I'm thinking of. I saw
Yeah.
the one you're talking about. Okay. All right. Very
As
nice
usual,
looking
you'll
one.
Send it up to me to give the QC. Right on.
Yeah, that's how all the customer guitars go.
Yeah. She's like,
Right
nope,
to me first.
nope. So, well, excellent. I see you've got a little cat kind of keeping company back behind there.
I got my two dogs.
Oh, it's dogs back there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I saw something moving back
It was
there.
kind of dark, and all I saw was fur moving. So, apologies, little doggy. Right on.
Nice.
So we also have with us tonight, I am going to attempt to say the last name. If I get it wrong, please correct me. But Mr. Andy Yakubik, I'm going to say. Let's get him in here. There he is.
Yakubik it is.
Yakubik it is. Right on. Welcome in, Andy. Good to see you. Good to meet
Thanks for
you.
having me. Thanks for having me.
So we were talking just a little bit in the green room, and I was kind of asking you a little bit about history because, like I had mentioned before, back in the early 2000s, I was looking for information about Steinberger guitars and Trans-trems, and I was trying to figure out where I could buy a Trans-trem, and I kind of stumbled across Steinberger World. So kind of tell us, we'll get right into it. Just tell us how you kind of got started and what you're doing with that website and where you are now and what's happening and anything and everything Steinberger.
Yeah, I'm late to the learning to play game. Actually didn't start noodling around until I was in college, and started on guitar, failed miserably, so I moved on to bass. And when I graduated college, my first bass was a USA Fury TV, pretty bad, and then had a used Steinberger in a place, and so I picked it up. And so I'd always had an affinity towards it, was always a big Rush fan, so I started that. When I moved to Chicago, came there, went to music stores. They had some. It was a time when Steinberger was kind of on the decline a bit, and they had a couple of XL2s on the wall for over a year. Convinced them to give me a good deal on them, so I walked out the door with them, and just kept noodling, kept playing. You know, I sung in bands in high school, sung a little bit, but like I said, late to the playing game. Probably did that for a while. Around 99, 2000, we had some kids. My wife went to work nights as a nurse, a weekend program, and I had to watch the kids. She always corrects me. I can't say babysit because I'm their father. Kids. But started looking into collecting, doing a little bit more. And a bunch of us ran across each other on eBay. You know, we were seeing the same names coming up for auctions all the time. We started buying and selling gear. Pretty quickly, we started to kind of coalesce a little bit. There was one of our group, a gentleman by the name of Andrew Campbell, that had already registered the Steinberger World domain. And so we're like, okay, we'll call it Steinberger World. He said, we'll get this website up, but let's do a forum, do something quick. So we did a Yahoo group. We were active there. Did that for a couple of years before we actually had enough of information and compiled it. And really, our goal at that point was just to get information out there. At the time, the only website out there that had any information, because this would have been around 99. Gibson had shuttered Steinberger production in 98. And the only person with a website was Ed Roman.
Wait, hang on. Who did you say again? Who did you say again? Who did you say?
Yeah, no, some guy. He was in Connecticut, moved to Vegas. Heard of him. And we knew that the information on his website was either incomplete or wrong.
Right.
Just flat out, if you called him and said, "Hey, I got this Trans-trem, it doesn't work," he's like, "Yeah, they don't work. Sell it to me."
Yeah. I'll take it off your hands.
Yeah,
piece
exactly.
Of junk.
He was swapping out Trans-trems for our trems on guitars at that point.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And so, yeah.
You mentioned that, and I seemed like I remember way back years ago reading on his website that will gladly upgrade your guitar to an R-trem. You know, just trade in your Trans-trem. I think I remember seeing that.
Yeah, and you'd pay like $200 or $300 for the joy of that, and then he'd keep the trem and sell it and do all go build guitars, and that's a whole nother issue. But basically, we all had run-ins with him. We knew other people, and we're like, we need to get information out there to owners and players. So it really was just a matter of no information. I had an interest, I had some time, and we just started going out, recollecting all this and trying to document as much as we could. Obviously, one of my first calls was to Ned. He was extremely supportive. He had just been, I think, NS Design has probably been open 2 or 3 years at that point. Right. So he was just in that journey. But talked with old people that worked at the old factory. One of Natalie's kind of partners now, Jeff Babbitts, who worked at the Newburgh factory for years. Jeff Carano, Andy Rossi, who now I think he still works for Fender. Another big person named Hap Kuffner, that a lot of people might not know, but Hap was one of the partners in Steinberger Sound, and he was kind of the sales guy. And Hap, if you're in the industry, Hap is a guy that everybody knows. He started with Mandolin Brothers. Really was one of the first vintage guitar dealers in the country, out on Staten Island, and got into the business that way. And really, the story of Steinberger is Ned had an idea. I don't know how. Are you guys familiar with the story of Steinberger?
Yeah, I am. But a lot of our chat may not be. Okay. And before we get too much further, let me just real quick, let me address the chat. I need to real quickly thank all of our channel members. We do have channel members on the channel. If you'd like to support the channel, we appreciate anything that you choose to do. We appreciate everyone here on this slide. We've got a couple new members. We have Paul Martin Woods, Hip Metal Works, and Bryce Regal. So channel membership is available if you'd like to support the channel. We appreciate every single one of you. Yeah, absolutely. Right on. Absolutely. Big help. So let me open up the chat here just real quick, and we're going to give a quick shout out to a few people that are here and hanging out. We're going to catch our channel members. There's Rob Blackmore Official. What's going on, Rob?
What's up,
There's
Rob?
Ferd Burfel. He's going to visit us during halftime. He's got to watch his football.
Chiefs.
Yeah, the Chiefs and the
Chefs.
Broncos, looks like. Yep. We've got channel member Nelson Rodriguez is here. R2R3 mixing it up in the chat and on the panel. Let's see. Mr. Stephen Franklin, appreciate you. Yostinator is here. Welcome in. Good to see you. There's Symmetry. Rob Blackmore Official again. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Scrolling. Got a lot of chat going on. Any questions that anybody has too as well in the chat, go ahead and put them in there. Put a big Q or a super chat or something that'll get it noticed. We'll try to get those answered. There's Herb of Fireside Studio. Welcome in. Good to see you. There's Hit Metal Works. And let's see, who else do we have hanging out? Said hello to Nelson Rodriguez, I believe. Let's see, real quick, scrolling through. There's channel member Randy Price. Welcome in. And there's new channel member Neil. I believe you know Neil, don't you, Natalie?
He's my next door neighbor.
Yeah. We appreciate you, Neil. Let's see. There's Miss Patty Dill, one of the biggest supporters of all of the community that we have here, all the Van Halen shows, our show here with all the Steinberger stuff. Patty Dill is one of the biggest supporters of all of the communities
Big
here.
time.
So big time shout out to Patty Dill. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Patty.
Patty is in the chat.
Patty is in the chat. So I think we have caught all of our channel members. There's Randy Price, and I think we are caught up. So sorry for that interruption, Andy. We will let you continue and carry on.
Not at all. But Ned's background, again, we talked with Hap, talked with other people, just getting as much information as we could, reestablishing all of this. A lot of it is now kind of common knowledge for everybody. The website, Steinberger World, has not been updated in probably, 10, 12 years.
Right.
They still keep it alive as an archive.
Yep.
Really, the purpose of it was to gather information. And once it's out there, we kind of served our purpose. Yahoo Group went away. I still have an archive of that I want to get up on online at some point. It's interesting to read those, how
Right.
little we knew back in those days.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so the journey continued. Those were the MusicYo days. We didn't have MusicYo. Basically, there's the business there that was an offshoot of Epiphone. And so through those days and all that stuff. And again, I'm still out here on social media helping people, trying to fill in gaps when I can, answering questions when I can.
Very nice.
Yeah, so it's been a long and interesting ride. I think 23 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I know that on Facebook groups that I'm on, I know that I've seen your name from time to time answering some questions. And, when Natalie had mentioned you and you kind of got involved with agreeing to come on the show, I was like, oh, yeah, I've seen that name before. So, yeah, it's great to have you here tonight, man. So
Great to
we're
be
looking
here.
for lots of information. Real
When
quick.
when I first took over Headless
Good to
USA,
see
Ned told me to go to Andy.
Oh, yeah?
And, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Now,
I've been bothering him ever since.
very cool.
Happy to help.
Now, one thing that, I've got a question about, obviously, Gibson tried to do the Steinberger thing with MusicYo, and did they put out any guitars that had trans-trems on them? Were there some that were...
Yeah, the MusicYo story, it was kind of an experiment for them, really. I mean, it started in 98, 99. It was started by Jim Rosenberg, who at the time was the president of Epiphone. For some personal reasons, he didn't want to be in Nashville, wanted to be on the West Coast with his family. So they basically revived the dead brands. They gave them Tobias, Steinberger, a bunch of Kramer, basically brands that were doing nothing. It was kind of at the beginning of the internet and online sales, and they didn't want to piss off their dealer network.
Right.
So that was kind of a way to go direct and work around that. And so they basically revived the brands that were the models that were easiest that had been made. They'd been making the Spirits over in Korea continually. At the time back then, Hohner was still selling their brands, which were made in the same Korean factory that the Spirits were. That whole thing was part of Steinberger's way to say, instead of trying to sue people making copies, we'll license it and make money from it. It's cheaper. And so that's how the Spirits came about. So they started those brands probably around 2002. because I had talked with MusicYo a lot, had worked with the folks there, with Jim Rosenberg, a couple of other people on the ground. They were part of Epiphone completely at that time. And there was talk of reviving the brands. And so we were able to locate who made the hardware for Steinberger, because it wasn't an in-house thing.
Right.
It was actually an agreement between them and a Japanese company to do that. And so technically, I don't think Steinberger Gibson owns the molds for those. And so, but they went back to that supplier to get bridges, both the Trans-trems, S-trems. They already had the R-trems made in Korea. And so they started making USA-based product. They did not restart their composite construction. That was a little too foreign to them. And at the time, Moses Graphite was making composite necks. And so they reached a partnership with them to supply composite necks. And I got a chance to work on projects with them. We had guys in the forum that donated guitars to get measured and everything. So they actually released GMs. They re-released what we commonly call the Newberg bound GMs, which are the strap-shaped ones.
Yep.
The unbound ones, which were more considered kind of the Nashville variety. And they also released what was called the GLB. They wanted to release a wood-bodied composite neck GL. And I told them I don't want to get confused on eBay when people put up a GL and it's not the all original composites. So I said put the B on it for bolt-on, which they took that advice.
Right.
The GLBs came with S-trems, but you could get trans-trems on the GMs. And so they sold those for a number of years. You know, it's one of those things that Steinberger is a brand, kind of an odd duck in many ways. MusicYo was a good match for it because actually in the heyday, Steinberger wasn't really driven. You know, they were the opposite of the market. You know, and kind of their success story was based on not doing things that the big guys are doing. And the only reason Ned started a company was because he couldn't sell the design to anybody. Nobody would touch it. He's like, if I want to get this made, got to do it myself.
You know, I often think of that scene in Back to the Future where he's up there and he's jamming on the guitar and he hands the guitar back and he goes, I guess y'all not ready for that, but your kids are going to love it. That's kind of what I feel like the Steinberger was years ago. It was this awesome product that people just weren't ready for or didn't know that they were ready for. And I think that, you know, Natalie and I have talked a little bit, and I have tried to kind of do what I can to kind of revive the information that's out there, you know, getting this stuff out on YouTube. I've actually got a petition there for, you know, reviving the USA manufacture of the Steinberger, because you've got all these headless guitar manufacturers and it's the thing now. So I think that now would be a good time to try to revive it. I don't know, you know, how much impact that we can have, but grassroots up, let's see what we can do. Well, but I think that it's an excellent product. And every time I play this thing, this I'm thinking it's a 86, maybe somewhere around there. The technology of this thing from 1986 is just phenomenal. I don't think people were ready for it.
They still aren't ready for it.
You don't think so?
It's funny because you look back and you're like, this is 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, it wasn't with Ned. It was all parts of it. It wasn't just that it was headless. It wasn't just that it was bodiless. It wasn't just that it was composite construction. Because we look back now and go, oh, it's composite. But back then, that was a complete new technology. And in other fields, you know, my son played hockey. All the sticks now are composite. The helmets are composite. You look at golf clubs, the shafts are all composite. You know, composites have made their way into a lot of other industries and completely replaced wood. For whatever reason, in the musical instrument industry, there's kind of been this bad vibe with composites.
Right.
You know, and I think, and again, the music industry is kind of like fashion. You know, things go in and out of fashion, and you know, in 20, 30, 40-year cycles. And it's funny because, you know, I remember the days of early collecting. It was like, oh, I remember those from the 80s. And then in the 2000s, you know, and you got into the teens, it was like I go into a music store with one of my headless basses, and kids are like, what's that? I've never seen one before.
What's that? Yeah.
You know, so it was before their time.
It's funny because I have another guitar. It's a wood body, wood neck, but it was a custom guitar that the luthier that put it together put a TransTrem on it. And I actually took it into a guitar center and I wanted to check out some amps. I was just looking for a little practice amp. And, you know, I'm over there and I'm shifting gears. I'm changing pitch while I'm playing. And the kid that's working there, he comes over and he goes, what is that? What are you doing? You know, and I showed him, you know, what the trem does. And he was just like completely blown away. He's like, that is so cool. Where can I get that? So I think that getting the information out there and people that have no clue what these things do, I mean, might help. But if someone were to get one of these in their hands, that would make them a believer in the composite material, I believe. I mean, this thing is awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, and you're starting to see things trend that way. Headless is obviously coming back. You've got brands like Strandberg, Kiesel, some others are really the headway. I sent an article to Ned probably 6 months ago where they were up and coming shredders, and it was one of those things that it was. I think 7 out of the 10 photos had guys with headless.
Yep.
You know, Tosin Abasi. You've got a whole bunch of other guys, and especially in Gent and all that, it's kind of headless is kind of their thing. But even, you know, Sinister Gates from Avenged Sevenfold, when they started their last tour, he comes out for 1 or 2 songs and is playing a headless guitar. It's a Schecter. You know, Ibanez has their headless basses. Yamaha's made a couple of headless basses. So it's out there.
Yeah.
One of the things with headless that's tough is a lot of times the hardware is proprietary. And so it's kind of a chicken and egg. You know, if we have the hardware, we make the guitars, and hardware gets expensive to make on its own.
Yeah.
You know, some things that are making that a little easier this is one of Ned's newer instruments. This is a 4-string bass, but actually the composite housing on this he started doing 3D printing. And so that's starting to open things up. I don't know if you guys have heard of, I've amassed I'm a parts collector. I keep one of everything.
Yeah, share what you got. We're all.
So I don't know how you're familiar with. You can't get original TransTrems. They don't make them anymore. You know, they haven't made a batch of those in 10 or 15 years.
Yep.
And so you've got companies. There's a company called RWB Engineering, aerospace engineers out of California that are really into the headless. One of the gentlemen was in our original Yahoo forum, and so they've started making headless hardware. And so they're making this. I don't know if you can read it.
And is that a hardtail?
This is a hardtail. I'll put some of this stuff aside. They actually make a fully milled TransTrem. Because for collectors, it was always the holy grail. What you'll find in the TransTrem is people love the original, what we call the version 1 of the TransTrem.
Version 1, yep.
And that's because it was all milled steel. It was milled locally for them. The biggest problem with the version 1s is it required threaded ball ends for the for those. And the problem is every time you change a string, you have to basically reset up the string for that.
Yeah.
So Ned came out with the second TransTrem. Those have it's a combination of cast and milled parts. Some of the parts of the pivot in that are cast because that was cheaper and easier. The jaws, the transposing pins, and all that. And I'll ship one of my cameras over here that I've got some of the parts. Those are milled, but RWB is making pivots and parts, and they make full trems. They actually Steve Klein. If you guys are familiar with him, Klein Headless, it became the GK guitar. Steve has gotten back into making electric instruments again, and so he needed trems, and so they started making fully milled S-trems and TransTrems.
Nice, very nice.
So not cheap, but it is fully milled, aerospace engineered within tolerances. The things perform flawlessly, so now they're available.
Yeah. Have you personally had your hands on one of the complete TransTrem models?
I have not had my hands on one of those, but everybody I've talked to said drop-in replacement, it works completely fine. I was going to say, several years ago, we did a reverse engineering of the TransTrem in the Yahoo group and got all the specs on everything.
Yep.
So that was the basis for them doing it.
Yeah.
And I worked with them a little bit to make sure the specs were right. But yeah, it's a dead-on clone of it.
I think that it would be a phenomenally successful and very, very popular product if it were to be mass produced again. Everyone that I kind of talk to privately that has been in the chat, I'll see on Discord or I'll even message with people, and they're like, I want to get a TransTrem. Where can I get one? Where can I get it? I want to get one. I want to, because it's so cool, So the information that I have found so far, now I know Natalie probably has a little bit better access, but for me, as a person searching on the internet and looking at Facebook, it still seems like it's an unobtainium kind of part. So it's still very difficult to find them and get them. I've told the story before. I kind of lucked out. I had purchased this one, before Don had passed from Headless USA, and I just happened to walk into a local music store here in Atlanta, and lo and behold, there's that custom guitar I was talking about hanging on the wall, and I could see from across the room when I walked in that it had a TransTrem on it, because I knew what it looked like. I went straight over to it, grabbed it off the wall, asked the guy about it, and he says, yeah, I don't know anything about that tremolo system. So I purchased that guitar. So those are my two. So I've been very, very lucky to be able to get some, but it's something that I think that more and more people, if they understood what it did and the musicality of it and what you can do with it, I think that it would be a very, very popular thing today if we could convince somebody to mass produce them for all of us.
Gibson, I'll just say it flat out, Gibson's missing the boat right now.
Exactly.
There appears to be no interest whatsoever for them with Headless.
Yep.
And it's, at that point, from everything I can tell, it's Caesar at the top. There's just not an interest in his part, and the company's not going to do things that he's not necessarily interested in. So,
well, and that's sort of the purpose of the petition that I've started. Hopefully it's only been started, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
A couple weeks.
Everybody here in the chat, if you would please sign that petition. If you support the cause of it, share it with your friends. If you guys are looking for a TransTrem style guitar and you want to see these brought back, sign it, share it. Let's get it viral so that we can have 30,000 signatures on it, and then we can present it to Gibson and say, see, people want this.
Do you think if it landed in the hands of a well-known artist, let's say like Phil X, for example, you think Gibson would maybe be interested in doing something like that? I don't know.
Artist endorsements are always a huge deal. And even in talking with Ned and his story, nobody paid attention to his bass until a NAMM show. Somebody got up on stage and played with it, and the next day their booth was swamped. And they've always been a key part of anything, with the bass, with Geddy Lee, Sting, Ross Valerie from Journey, some other prominent players at the time. And then, on the guitar side, Eddie Van Halen, Vito Bratta, was huge for them. Huge. Mm-hmm. It's part and parcel. I remember an article about 6 months ago that it was mentioned Matt Heafy was going to Gibson for some custom work, and he mentioned maybe even doing a Steinberger, and so whether it's some older guitarists, newer guitarists, those kinds of things are interesting. But the one thing I will say too is that the artists are not going to put that into their arsenal unless they have support. I was fortunate to actually do some repairs on Reeves Gabrel's, one of his guitars, and TransTrem. This would be about 15 years ago. And he said basically he had to stop using them because they couldn't take him on a tour because if something broke, then I can't get it fixed.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that's tough on this, just because there aren't replacement parts and all of that, and there was no support at Gibson at the time. And so there's kind of a few things that have to happen with that, but no doubt an artist endorsement, somebody getting behind it like that. Like you said, I watched the forums when Sinister Gates was up on stage, and everybody's like, "That's a Steinberger. That's a Steinberger." I'm like, "No, it's not a Steinberger."
What I'm waiting for is for obviously a huge Van Halen fan, huge gearing of that with this channel. I'm waiting for Wolfgang to pick up his dad's GL2T,
Yeah.
and figure out some kind of cool song with it, and then actually play it, and people go, "What is that? What is he doing?" I want one of those. And
That would be interesting.
guess what? You know,
Kind of like having an 8-string guitar's range in 6 strings. I mean, you got to start to appeal into those real heavy guys,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
you know, obviously you have the EVH company, you know, that he is obviously endorsed by or part owner of, I guess now. So how much sway could he have? You know, I mean, is it something that EVH could even do a guitar that they design their own trans-trem and put on it? But I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It would be awesome though to see Gibson see that there's an interest in it and start bringing it back.
Natalie can confirm that, you know, Eddie sent his guitars back for service to Jeff because the plan was to take him out on tour. You know, even if he would have been able, you know, sadly passed at that time, but if he would have been able to go out on another tour, I have no doubt that GL would have made an appearance on a couple of songs, and that would have been a huge deal.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, if Eddie would have lived longer, he would have probably taken it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What year was that? That was back 2015, something like that he sent it in?
I think it's 2015. I think that is the right date.
Yeah.
I know that Jeff said that a few years later he did give it to Wolfgang.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. So Wolfgang has it.
Wolfgang has it.
So
Wow, you guys, I don't know if you guys know, he had more than just the candy stripe one and the 12-string one. He actually had a number of other Steinbergers that he just apparently bought off the rack.
Right.
I think Jeff tells the story that one time Eddie's people basically said, we're sending, you know, his Steinbergers back for service, and they're like, okay, we know which ones we're getting, and like 2 or 3 other guitars were back there as well, and then like, where did these come from? You know, they came through our factory, but we didn't know they were for him, and they found out we basically had bought them off the rack.
Yep. Well, obviously, we all know that he really, really enjoyed the trans-trem and what you could do with it. You know, he had the PV Wolfgangs that had them on there. So he enjoyed and, you know, found it musical, you know, as far as, you know, what he could do with it. And so he continued to use the trans-trem, you know, even after the Steinberger stuff with his endorsements with the other guitars. He had them put on there. So obviously it was something that he enjoyed using and saw the value of it. So,
well, I will share the story that Ned designed a prototype trem that he sent to Eddie, and he sent it to him, and Eddie sent it back and said, "This makes no sense to me." And what it was basically a transposing trem, but the trem arm was the strap button. So it's kind of like a B-bender. You're familiar with country music a little bit?
Yeah.
Kind of like a trem that's on a B-bender thing. And so the mechanism was all built into the body and all that
wow.
stuff.
Okay.
Into the trans-trem that you could, you know, bend, push down on it on the strap button, and it would bend the notes. And for whatever reason, it just didn't connect with Eddie. He's like, I don't get this.
Right.
So
don't see
that went back
doing
into a drawer at Ned's shop.
Right. And this was before the trans-trem, or?
Oh, this was after the
This was
trans-trem.
after? Okay.
This would have been, well, the second generation trans-trem, I think, came out in 87, 86. So probably would have been about 89, 90.
Okay.
So at that time, it would have been after Ned had sold the company and went back to heavy design, just doing that.
Right.
So, yeah, I've seen a few pics of it. Ned, a few years back, Ned pulled it out and some parts had broken and all that stuff, and I hooked him up with a guy to do some milling to get it back into shape. So one of these days I have to go to Ned's shop. That's what's one of my bucket list items is I've invited myself to Ned's shop. I said, I just want to walk around your shop and look at all this
You know,
stuff.
I could picture, you know,
Holy
again,
Brown.
a Back to the Future reference, you know, walking into Doc Brown's studio or labs or whatever, and all of the stuff that he had. I can imagine Ned having a shop like that, you know, with all of these different ideas, you know, and all these things that he has. Let me work on this one a little bit. Let me work on this.
If you ever see some of the, occasionally he'll do Zooms when the NS does some stuff, and you'll see he does them from his shop. And if you look in the background, you'll see, you know, prototypes hanging on the wall and all of that. You're like, I have to take a look at that.
Well, I'm still trying to see if we can have Natalie talk him into coming on here. And
Andy's a better bet to talk him into it.
I will talk to Ned.
excellent, excellent. We would love to pick his brain. I have always I'm continually my mind is blown by the genius that it took to come up with this transposing tremolo.
Especially after you did that show where you took it apart and did the bearings and replaced the spring. And we got, for myself being kind of an engineer nut too, looking at the way it's designed and that's just so cool, man.
Yeah, everything from how far the string has to sit in the jaw, how much pull it puts on it, to the different cantilever of the bearings of how that moves differently as it pivots.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and part of that comes from the fact that Ned, like Leo Fender, is not a player.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not familiar with his background, his dad was a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. His mom was a musician. He grew up mostly with his mom, and but Ned kind of straddles those two worlds of science and music, and awesome. It's interesting. I've been fortunate to get to know Ned. It's one of those, for me. It's been such a pleasurable thing to kind of talk to your heroes, meet your heroes, become friends with your heroes. And anybody who's ever, and Natalie can attest to this, anybody who's ever talked to Ned, he is the most humble, generous person you could ever imagine. Doesn't take compliments comfortably, anything like that, to throw around the genius and all that. And I once had a fortunate lunch down at NAMM, Summer NAMM, with him, Hap Kuffner, and Rob Turner from EMG. We went over there and they were talking a little bit about, why did you get into guitars and all that stuff? And part of it was from his father. His father worked with guys like Enrico Fermi and Oppenheimer and all of them. Not necessarily on the bomb, but his dad's Nobel Prize was actually in atomic research. And he said, to me, guitars and music are the antithesis of bombs. And I was like, whoa, it kind of stuck with me on that. Mm-hmm. And so, but he came at this, again, kind of his background that, he got into furniture design out of college, went to University of Maryland, got a degree in sculpture, and was basically sculpting ergonomic furniture and all that.
Right.
Well, sold his designs, got into a woodwork co-op where he was building custom cabinets for high-end clients. And it just so happened that in that co-op where they shared space was Stuart Spector, with his assistant Vinny Federa, which is another name. And they were sitting around a table at lunch one time, and he's working on these, and the balance isn't good and all that. And Ned's like, let me give a shot at this. And that's what became the Spector NS2 bass, still made today. And Ned's idea for the trem was, they'd come out with the Steinberger bass, they'd come out with the Steinberger guitar, came out with a hardtail just so they could hit the market, in part because people were already making copies of the Steinberger guitar before Steinberger even released theirs. And so they kind of had to rush them to market. For anybody that has one of those P-numbered GLs that are kind of hand engraved with a number, those were a run of a little over 100. And P isn't prototype, pre is pre-production run.
Okay.
The molds and everything weren't fully, they weren't tweaked quite right yet. And they were just trying to get product out to everybody else. So they, so Ned knew that he had to design a trem, but he started looking at trems and playing them, and he realized that the strings went out of tune when he started to move it. And his, he comes at this as, more of an engineer and not a musician, and he's like, why aren't they in tune?
Yeah.
And so his whole thing is, why not? And so he just sat down and got around that, and he just tinkered and figured it out. And it took me I wouldn't say a long time. It took me a bit of time to wrap my brain around how the TransTrem works, because you look at these things, and I'll go ahead and switch my cam to my side cam here. Go ahead and do that. I've got a.
Well, I honestly, until I physically got my hands on one, I thought that it had like these springs underneath that adjusted tension as the bar was moved up and down. I had no clue until I actually got one in my hands.
Yeah, so what Ned kind of realized was that to change, each string has to change its tension differently. And so
Different radius.
it's different. Well, at a different ratio. And the way to do that is to basically build a cam system.
Right.
If you're familiar with cams, the idea is if you want to move the string a lot, the cam is farther out from the pivot point. If you want less movement, that it's farther in. And so on a trans-trem, what you'll see is these jaws kind of have different heights,
Right.
which basically change where that ball end sits in that cam in space. Now, to Ned's credit, the other thing that he had to deal with was the fact that it was headless. So, which means that if the string isn't the right length, the ball end starts in the wrong spot.
Right.
So that's what basically became calibrated strings.
Yep.
And so the whole idea of the calibration is I know the length of the string and I know where I need to put the ball end in space in the bridge. And then these jaws will basically rotate in the proper cam to go ahead and provide that.
Yep.
And so it's one of those things that's just, even now when you look back at it, it's just ingenious.
Yep.
And the idea of that. Now, I do want to show you guys something here. I'll go ahead and go to this camera again. Are you seeing my camera or not?
We see. Yeah. There you are.
Me now? Okay, I'm going to go back to this camera too because
Okay.
some of you guys everybody's familiar kind of with this, what we call the version 2. Again, the version 1 trans-trem was the one that required ball ends, threaded,
The threaded,
ball ends
yes.
and all that. The trans-trem 2, we call it version 2, was these. Now, the holy grail for most collectors is actually a combination of this.
The 1.5.
The
Because,
1.5.
We call it a trans-trem 1 retro, a retro
Okay.
fit. Basically, what happened was because with the threaded balls, when you took those out, now you had to basically recalibrate the string all over again. It was such a hassle that Ned decided, okay, we aren't going to do that, and we'll have the adjustment be separate from the ball end. You could send your guitar back to the factory, and they would basically mill it out and put the version 2 jaws into the fully milled housing of a version 1 trem.
Right.
And so that became what we call a Type 1 retrofit, or the 1.5 if you want. And so that, for a lot of collectors, those are the holy grail because the steel's a little heavier. There's a little bit more mass. People claim that there's a little bit more sustain. The tone's a little sweeter on it. And so I actually was fortunate when they were doing production through Epiphone again to re-release more new models to work on Ned with a project that was what we call the Type 3 trans-trem.
Right.
These were on the ZT3 guitars. And it was interesting because Ned, we actually had a group of probably about 20, 25 people from that Yahoo group that we kind of invited to that. And we just went back and forth with Ned on questions and answers. And, how does this work? What about this? Why don't you do this?
Yep.
And so we kind of went back and forth, and Ned kind of took all that in and came out with this design. One of the interesting things about this design is you'll see the lines here, because setting up a Type 2 trem can be tricky, because you want those to be in certain space, and if the strings aren't right or whatever, you kind of don't know if you got it right.
Yep.
Going back and forth, and when you go to floating again, it doesn't work, but why? So you kind of put these lines on this. These lines tell you where to start. Where you want to be on things.
Nice.
One of the other things he did, he made it a pivot. Instead of having bearings and pins, he basically made it a pivot bridge.
Oh, okay.
Because one of the complaints on the trans-trem and the S-trem is that the bearings will wear, and you'll get that. The engineers listening would say that using a bearings for that is the wrong application of it.
It never fully rotates, right?
Exactly. You don't get full rotation, and because of that, sometimes you run into some issues of just the wear being in a very small arc.
Right.
And so that's why the bearings sometimes in trans-trems will go bad. So he went with the pivot, and the other thing that he did is the trem arm and locking it in and all that got kind of weird. Most people have probably never seen the bottom of one of these. And so what he did is he put that transposing arm, that little notched arm that you see, put it inside the trem. So when you see that, that's that transposing arm.
Yep.
And it goes against a little lever that's here on the bridge on the inside.
Right.
And so when you put this back together, so when you're moving it, and you've kind of got this, when you move the trem, you move it up and down, and then when you move the arm, it locks in.
Oh, look at there.
Now, the challenge on this is this gets seated into the guitar. Nobody can see the arm.
Yep.
And that was one of the feedback on that and made it difficult was that people couldn't see what, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what I'm trying to go into. Am I up? Am I down?
Yeah.
And so there was probably a little bit of, it was a struggle for people with that.
You know, I had an opportunity to play one of the ZT3s. It was at a Sam Ash guitar store or music store, and I was so excited. I was like, "Oh, here's a Trans-trem," and I pulled it all the way up, but it wouldn't transpose to G. I was so disappointed. I couldn't play Summer Nights with it. What was the reasoning for the different pitch range?
Some of it was he was trying to simplify it. You know, there was some of the feedback he got was there were too many positions. You know?
Oh no.
And so he tried to simplify it a little bit, and so that was he lost a few of those positions. Ned has been one of those. He's always been kind of open to sharing certain things, and some of the talk was, you know, if we got to the point where production would continue and all that, and now it could happen. 10 years, 15 years ago it would have been tougher, but getting stuff made, getting custom transposing pins made. If you don't use certain ones, can we just get that done? That's probably much more of a doable thing now. So if production were to come back, you could do that. One of the other questions is always, why can't I get E flat?
Right. Yeah.
And really, Ned says there's just not enough room on that transposing arm to be able to effectively lock into it. It's there's just not enough. There's just not enough space. Sorry, I didn't change my.
Well, that's why you need two guitars. So you tune one to E flat, and then you can transpose from there.
Actually, if you're on the road, you need 4 because you got to have a backup for each
Or
one.
double neck.
There you go. There you go.
That's a nice segue.
Yeah.
I'll add one
Baritone
thing
on top, though.
one thing I challenged Ned on was, Ned, you call it a trans-trem, but you actually can't use the trem when it's in another key.
Right.
And he took that and he ran with it, and they actually made a prototype that you could set another position to be floating.
Oh, wow.
And it had a lever. If you're familiar with the DB bridge on a Steinberger bass, do I have a DB bridge here? I may. Sorry, I'm out of frame. That's not it. I don't think
How would you do that? Two levers,
I
maybe?
can grab one.
What a DB bridge does, and I'll come back
Boner.
here. A DB bridge has a lever on the E string for a bass to go to down to D. You can set it to a note. I don't think you can go all the way down to B, but especially with hip shots, it basically was a competition with that. And so it's got a lever that allows you to do that. And so you basically built a prototype that had a little lever that when you flip that, you could go to one other position.
Oh, wow.
And they had some artists test it, and he said the biggest drawback was when you flip that lever, the spring tension and the string tension causes it to kind of hit hard, and you get this funk that comes through.
Gotcha.
And because of that, and because it got so complex and everything, they didn't proceed with that. But there was a prototype made of that ZT3 that actually allows you to transpose to another key and still use the trem.
Mm-hmm. What was that question you just put up, Trev?
It wasn't me.
Oh, that wasn't you?
It was me because it's like the third time he was asking. So I figured.
He said, did Gibson make the wooden bodies for the GMs?
I kind of.
Kind of.
And what I mean by that is some of the bodies were produced in-house. And when he says, well, this would be the question of when. If you go back to when Gibson bought out Steinberger, some of those bodies were made in-house. Steinberger, over its production, always tried to have at least 2 body suppliers. So they made the necks, they had the hardware made or had it customized. They never made their own bodies in-house. Even these face plates were not made in-house. It was a plastics company that made these, and then they would spray them with gel coat in the factory.
Right.
But they didn't make their own bodies. For a time, right after the buyout, Gibson Montana was supplying them bodies. Gibson had basically decided to have all of their divisions on profit and loss individually. And so the Gibson Montana started to outsource to make money. They started making bodies for other companies.
Oh, wow.
And Steinberger was one of the companies. And Natalie, I'm sure there are lots of pictures of these on their website, but if you see the GMs that have really nice figured tops from the 80s with the black backs, they were the custom ones that have the gold logo. Most of those bodies were made by Gibson Montana. Any of the Koa, those Koa ones that you see the GMs, which are basically one solid piece of figured Koa, those were made by Gibson Montana. And so they did that for a while. I don't know how long that lasted after the move to Nashville. And so I don't know who the suppliers were after that time. I've not really talked with many workers from that time. When MusicYo started up production again, some of the bodies were made in-house. Some of them were made at other places. And so some were actually cut and finished in-house. I think some of the first GM Newberg reissues were made in-house. Other ones, again, were cut other places. I think a lot of the outside finishing went through Pat Wilkins Guitars in California. Some of the early bodies were made in Japan. They ordered a whole bunch from a company called Terada, which if you do any research about Les Pauls and other kind of some of the 80s guitars coming out of Japan came out of Terada.
Gotcha.
And that factory. And so I was fortunate to go down to the factory a couple of NAMMs, and I saw a whole palette of bodies from Terada that they had made, figured ones that were really nice. And so that was during the MusicYo years.
Now, speaking of MusicYo, is there speculation of why they stopped, or do we know it just wasn't profitable, or?
It was profitable. And again, I can give you more information than you might care to know on these. I am kind of the unofficial historian of everything on this.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious as to why they would have stopped,
It really was about two things. One was that I don't know if I mentioned the name Jim Rosenberg in our talk or our pre-talk, but Jim Rosenberg was the head of Epiphone. And he basically had decided to not be in Nashville. Gibson had given them dead to guitar brands. He said, let me do this online sales thing. This would have been about 98, 99. And internet sales weren't a big thing. Gibson didn't want to tick off their existing dealer network and start selling direct. So they gave him all these dead brands. So you would have had Steinberger, Kramer, Tobias. And so he had worked with Epiphone, had contacts in Asia. And so they started selling the more of the Korean and other Asian made brands. So that was successful, and MusicYo took off, and MusicYo did really well. Again, they expanded to do USA production. They started making their USA production was basically the Epiphone USA staff. Epiphone started having success with other US made stuff. They were reissuing the Casino guitars. Kramer was coming back, and they were having some success with Kramer.
Yep.
And really, it's the story of Epiphone becoming and so much success of selling imports at that point that brought back to run Epiphone again.
Gotcha.
So they brought him back to run Epiphone, and he didn't have as much time to spend on MusicYo anymore. Two other things happened at that time. One was that if you guys remember that Gibson went through like a dealer restructuring around 2005, 2006 that kind of ticked off all their dealers.
Right. Yeah.
Part of that was them consolidating all their brands. And so the decision was made at that point, we're going to sell Steinberger retail, which I think was a death knell for them, because Steinberger was always an odd brand that even in its heyday, it was people going into the store going, I want a Steinberger, and it wasn't dealers saying, oh, you don't know anything about this brand. And so it was always kind of guerrilla marketing and all that with what they did. Right. And so I thought that Steinberger was, it still is very much an internet, in an internet enabled kind of brand.
Okay.
You know, it's really kind of a better fit for them.
Right.
Just because it's just this odd duck. You put it in a store and guys don't know about it, and,
Yeah.
and most people don't, and so
How do you hang them on the walls and where you display
all
them?
of that, it's just an odd duck, you know.
Yeah.
And that was the funny thing is that you mentioned, you know, Headless getting popular again. There was a time there around 2000, about the time that they folded the brand, that I felt like there was kind of critical mass. That we're getting to the point where some really interesting things can happen.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, they were restructuring their. Jim comes over, Rosenberg comes over. He's going to take over Epiphone more and has to worry about that. Their production has shot up immensely, so it's taking more time and energy. One other thing that happened at that point, they had employees pilfering product in the factory. And they actually were news reports that they had the screenshots of taking people out because of the level of theft.
Oh, wow.
And ironically, one of the things that was easiest to steal were TransTrems.
Right. Yep.
Because they're a little package like this,
Yep.
and I could sell them on eBay for $1,500.
Yep. Yep.
And unfortunately, a lot of the stock of TransTrems and the Steinberger parts walked out the door.
Right.
And all three of those things together kind of conspired against it, and so they decided to shutter MusicYo.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And when that happened, within a year, I think 18 months, the brand was dead. You know, there just wasn't anything going on with it. The dealers really didn't have much interest or enthusiasm for the brand. Gibson's requirements of the dealers to carry product in the store made it difficult, and so.
Right.
And Jim Rosenberg was very much a champion of the brand. You know, he saw its potential, believed in what Ned was doing. He was in charge when they rolled out the Synapse line.
Mm-hmm.
He was in charge when they developed the ZT3. They had designs on even making a ZT bass at that point. I've actually got a prototype here,
Nice.
but it just kind of fell apart, you know.
Yep.
And then, you know, the story of Gibson from there, you know, we all know is one of Henry Juskowitz's folly,
Yep.
and it just cratered at that point.
Yep.
And unfortunately for us as Steinberger aficionados, the hope was that, you know, Henry had a love-hate relationship with Steinberger. That's why I thought Epiphone was a better fit for it. And it was kind of out of the way, and it didn't require any interest or involvement with Gibson. And the hope was when KKR bought Gibson out that they'd see the value of all these dead brands like Kramer, like Steinberger, and put some effort and energy into them. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened.
Right.
So it's just laid fallow for a bit of time. And you would think that seeing all these other brands coming out with Headless and all the, you know, you go through Guitar Player and you'll see pictures of it, and you watch YouTube videos and you're seeing those players, that it would kind of get their attention. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, it hasn't. It hasn't registered on theirs.
You know what's funny though? Today I knew this was coming up, so I scoured YouTube for Trans-trem videos. There's not much there. The bulk of them is from Ryan, to be honest
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
You know, and it's very underrepresented on what it can do, because the few are out there are guys that don't have the knowledge to be able to make it work the way it should.
Yep.
So it would be something if there was a pro shot, big name player that, you know, said, "Hey, look at this thing. This is, you know, what we could do with it."
Yep.
Yep.
I mean,
Check this out.
that would probably kickstart a
and the
good
beauty of the
revolution.
internet now is that you can put together videos on how to set it up. You know, there's easy places to find strings. You don't have to go to your local shop and what's a calibrated string, and you know those
That's what
kinds
we're
of
here
things.
for.
You know, and so again, it's another reason why Steinberger kind of is a perfect dovetail, and the internet would have been perfect for it, and still is. So I still have hope, you know, but you know, I've seen things lay fallow for a very long time, and so
Yep.
it's frustrating. I try not to get too excited about it, because there were times that, you know, that I'm like, we can do this, we can do this, and now I'm kind of like, You
Yeah.
know, I'm here for the players and for it out there, but you know, to echo what you said before, you know, the frustration now is that these guitars, because they're so collectible and hard to find, that, you know, the average player can't enjoy a Trans-trem, you know, can't get to these things. And so, I'm one of those people that sometimes the guitar is made to be played. It's not to sit in its case, and its purpose is to ring out. And so that's the frustrating part. That we can't get these in the hands of more people. But I think there's a from a business standpoint, I think there's a market there.
I wholeheartedly 100% agree with you. Absolutely.
They're never going to be.
Especially because all of us old Dodgers love them, right? Because we remember. But if you could get this in the hand of a Tosin or one of those guys, and they use their brilliant musical knowledge to be able to unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will say that Ned has not given up on ideas. Ned is always thinking, and so I think one of the frustrations right now is that even while Gibson has not done anything with Headless, Ned's brain has continued to work and his hands have continued to work on things. You've seen it. I'll kind of pull this out. Again, I'm a bass player, not a guitarist. And this is his new company, NS Design. This is the Radius. And it's funny because, some things come full circle. If you were to go look at pictures of Spectres and their shape, this isn't too unlike that.
Yeah.
It also, like a Spectre, is radius, so it's much more comfortable on the tummy. This is if Gibson was active with Steinberger, this probably would have been a Steinberger bass.
Wow.
Honestly. Just because if I show you, can you guys give me a minute?
Absolutely.
I've got too many things here.
We want to see it all. So
okay, because I will get all of this.
We want to see what Natalie has in the case as well.
We were segueing into that double neck a minute ago.
Yeah, my collection is in my storage here in my basement. I tried to grab a few of things that I thought we might talk about a little bit. But this was, if you're familiar with the ZT guitar, this is the ZT bass.
Very nice.
So this is actually the first 6-string Steinberger bass.
Nice.
Very, very cool.
It has the Synapse hardware. Wow. This was made by one of Ned's craftsmen that works with him for NS. But you look at it, it's not too dissimilar from this.
Yep. Now
you can see the family lineage.
Right. So is there anything that would stop Ned from putting out another guitar with a early style Trans-trem on it?
No. Again, Ned is such a kind person. I don't think he wants to invoke anybody's wrath, including Gibson. I'm not privy to what agreements he has with Gibson on that front, but from my understanding, he can design those because the Radius bass also has a Radius guitar that he's made prototypes for, and he's worked on a Trans-trem for the Radius guitar. So he's not precluded.
Equation into the mix.
Yeah, so he's not precluded from. Sorry, just trying to make things look better. He's not precluded from the Trans-trem technology. The patents on everything have already expired.
Right.
He's actually named on the patents, which is important. But he's not given up on the idea of transposing and trans-trems and all of that.
Right.
It's honestly, it's trems and those kind of things. It's one of the reasons the Radius guitar hasn't hit the market. He put it out, made a hardtail that's similar to the hardware on that, and everybody's like, "Where's the trem? Where's the trem? Where's the trem?" And so he said, "Well, we'll put this aside until he doesn't have. He's got a smaller company now, and tooling and those kind of things get expensive."
Yep.
But he's not given up on that idea at all.
Yep.
And he hasn't given up on the GL either. I don't know if you guys have seen. There was a guitar? Because you were mentioned in it, Natalie. Was that Guitar World? Guitar Player?
Premier Guitar?
Premier Guitar.
Where they showed a picture of what he's right now. The working name is Phin, Phin, which is basically a GL version 2.
Yep. Natalie showed that to me, and I said, "Slap a Trans-trem on it," and it sold. Let me have it.
So knowing Ned, I don't know. I'm not privy to this, but every time he's ever designed anything, he's already thinking 2, 3, and 4 steps ahead. I don't doubt that he's designed a trem for that. The idea on that guitar is individual saddle tuners because it allows you to do multi-scale necks. It allows you to do 7 strings, 8 strings,
Right.
all of that. But I don't doubt that he's thought about, okay, how can I put a trem on this?
Right. Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
transpose? So his brain's still working on kind of, some of these things like this are more evolutionary,
Mhm.
but he's still thinking about what can I do that's kind of revolutionary.
Yeah. It would be exciting to see something like that.
Yeah.
You know.
So one other thing I wanted to share with you guys, because I don't, many people have never seen this. I'm going to switch to my other camera again. Is what these necks, what the guitars look like on the inside. So you
Look
guys
at here.
Steinberger composite, right?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of the talk on that. It's kind of made similar to an M&M. Ned started learning from a gentleman by the name of Robert Young who built boats.
Mm-hmm.
And so a Steinberger's made very similar to how boats are made. There's kind of a composite underlayment. There's an epoxy that's injected to that, and the mold is sprayed with gel coat, and that gel coat is the outer coating here.
Right.
And so on a Steinberger, that can be fairly thick, much thicker than a paint would be normally.
Right.
But Steinbergers were always made. Steinbergers have wood in them.
We learned that recently from Natalie.
Yeah.
We asked that question. She got the information from Jeff, and he said it's was it balsa wood?
It's balsa wood. So what you're seeing here is a balsa wood core. And this again gets into the engineering side of things where a tube is stronger than a rod.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Ned has even admitted that he kind of wanted to use wood. He could have used composite for this core, but he still kind of wanted to have wood in it for people to go, oh, it's not wood. So there is some wood in it. And they would basically make the general, a very basic thin form of what either the neck or with the GL, it would have the neck and a little, bend there, and then a part for the body, the beam that goes through the middle.
Right.
And then they would basically use that as the core. They would wrap the fiberglass. If I rub my finger on this, you'll see my fingers get black.
Yep.
So that's the graphite
Oh, wow.
coming off, like pencil lead.
Hmm.
And you see the striations, that's some of the fiberglass. And so they would basically do fiberglass
Layered.
and
Yeah.
graphite. They'd wrap it in what they call kind of a pre-preg. They'd wrap it around, and then they would put these pre-pregs into the molds. So they'd spray those molds, put these in, and then they'd inject them and vacuum seal them, and then suck all this epoxy, the black part you see here, on there.
That is amazing.
So on the neck, and the funny thing is the neck, it's not, it basically has a taper to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's thinner. It's thinner at the heel, or it's thinner at the headpiece, and then it gets thicker as you go through.
Right.
So, yeah. So this was a neck that at some point somebody at the factory totally botched because they cut it wrong. So I asked once because they had this in a pile, and I'm like, hey, could you cut that up for me?
That is
I'd
awesome.
love to have that. So
That is awesome.
again, always have kept that as kind of a reference. But, we sit here and we love the tone of these things, love the sustain, but it's like, I wonder what it looks like actually on the inside.
Well, yeah.
That's very cool.
We were always curious about it, and it just so happened that we had, asked about it, and Jeff had answered the question for us, and Natalie relayed it back that, in fact, balsa wood in the neck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
Awesome.
pour one out for the poor guitar that got sacrificed for that process.
Yeah.
right.
Pour a little out there.
Yeah, the other thing too is that I'll pop it up here too, is that they the phenolic that they used
Mm-hmm.
basically was a sheet, and then they had Ned designed actually a custom sanding machine that would sand in the radius and the relief all in one operation.
Wow.
So it was basically a flat piece of phenolic that they would take, and they would basically sand that. So you can kind of see the phenolic there on the top.
Mm-hmm.
Got the dot markers coming through.
16-inch radius, right?
15-inch, I believe.
15? Okay.
I'll give you. It's possible it's 16. I seem to recall 15. Fairly wide on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, phenolic, and it's partly. It's funny because anybody who has a Steinberger, they realize when they start playing it, it loses some of its sheen, but over time it almost gets like a wood grain look to it.
Yes.
And for those not familiar with phenolic, it's also called ebenol sometimes. They're starting to use it more, which is one of the interesting things with sustainability and all that. You're starting to see phenolic used a little bit more. They use other names for it because phenolic isn't very glamorous. But when it starts to get that kind of graininess to it, what that is these are basically big sheets of and this for Steinberger they use paper-based phenolic. There's fabric-based phenolic and all that. But basically what they did is they would get big sheets of it and then they'd cut it. Well, when they're making the phenolic, it gets they vacuum pack it. It'll get pressed in from the top and the bottom and on the sides. But when Steinberger cuts these, there's the chance for moisture to actually kind of wick into that paper.
Okay.
And so over time, the phenolic is hygroscopic, so it will absorb water.
Right.
And so that's why sometimes it'll get a little gray, and you'll start to see what almost looks like wood grain on it. And that's just a little bit of the water kind of absorbing into the phenolic. It doesn't hurt it at all, and it's one of the strangest things that we tell people is use WD-40, which
Really?
for a guitar person is like, you don't want to do that. When I work on guitars, if I'm working on a GL or an XL or a neck, I'll actually run it under water to clean it. Doesn't hurt it at all. But what the WD-40, if you look on a can of WD-40,
Water displacement.
one of the things is it'll say that it removes moisture.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you take that, kind of rub a good, I don't know if my camera's coming back here.
Now, is that something that Jeff has mentioned before?
I don't know if Jeff has mentioned it. It's something that Ned did. He recommended it.
Really?
And the other person who really, I may, I'm trying to think now. I may have discovered it from Joe Zahn, who also used phenolic on his basses. But it's now it's one of those things we discovered and now is common knowledge. But if you use the WD-40, kind of wipe it on really liberally, wipe it off a little bit, let it sit, wipe it off, do 3 or 4 coats of that a little bit. And then at the end, kind of, rub it so there's no WD-40 kind of sitting around. You can be liberal on the neck, but don't let it run into the cavity or anything. But you do that 3 or 4 or 5 times, buff it up. What you'll see is it'll come back to a little bit more of the dark black will come back.
Interesting.
How long does it take for the smell to go away?
Not that long, honestly. It doesn't really soak in. So it's probably more in your nose than it's on the neck.
Wasn't there something mentioned about that recently? Natalie, did you say something about the WD-40?
Jeff said not to use it on the bridge, on the Trans-trem.
Gotcha.
Well, that gets into the fact that WD-40 is not a lubricant,
Right.
technically. So it's more a
solvent.
cleaner. So if you're lubing anything on any of the trems, the jaws or all of that stuff, I use
Silicone, graphite?
here. The thing I use most often is Hops gun oil. Gun oils are really good because they're designed for metal on metal lubrication, and they're designed for high humidity environments. So you can even go to a Walmart still and get Hops gun oil. So just apply that. But yeah, you don't want to be too crazy trying to lube your trem. I've talked to repair people that have opened up cavities and found just it can basically degrade the base of where the trem is at, and all that composite will start to soften if you get too crazy with that stuff. So you just, if you need to put it on a Q-tip or whatever and kind of put it on there, just a drop or two, work it in. That's the best thing.
Yep. Now, what do you think, honestly, is the overall life of one of these? Will it eventually begin to, the guitar itself break down, or?
It's funny because I've had that discussion with Ned. I would argue that more Steinbergers have seen their 20th, 30th, and 40th birthday than other guitars.
Right.
In part because you can abuse the heck out of these, and they'll come back. One of the GLs, I've been fortunate to buy and sell a boatload of guitars over time. And one of the sales that came to me was a guy who found one helping a friend of his, and it was stuffed in an attic, in the keys of the attic. And it had been there for probably 10 or 15 years. And it wasn't a climate-controlled attic.
Right, yeah.
And so he pulls this out. It had a Roland synth in it. And he's like, I don't know if anything works. and I'm like, I'm not buying this if the Roland synth doesn't work, because I don't know if you guys have ever seen those. But in the 80s, they put internal Roland synths into about 100 of those. I think Jeff Babbitt's actually had to assemble all of those. And if you've ever seen inside of a GL cavity, ain't a whole lot of room.
Yeah, they're kind of small. Yeah.
So having all those knobs and everything, but that one came to me, and 10 years, it was in New York, so you got the hot, the cold, the humidity, all that stuff. And I got it. Other than corrosion on metal parts, but the composite itself, the frets were in good shape. I mean, all it took was basically a little bit of a clean and polish, tune it back up, and it was in perfect shape.
Ready to rock, huh?
Yeah, you'll see bridges online. I think there are even some eBay auctions right now where the trems are looking pretty hard.
Yeah.
And that's where people put them away, didn't wipe off the bridges and did all that. Even the metal parts, the milled parts are steel, but those will rust. The Zamac in particular, the zinc metal alloy that they use for the casting, really doesn't like moisture. It will just start to disintegrate almost instead of rust.
Right.
You'll see base bridges a lot with that. You'll see kind of this pitting on the top of them.
Right. Yeah.
And so, but in general, like I said, the talk that I had with Ned was that I just don't think a lot of these have failed. And so I think more of them see more of these instruments have seen a 30th, 40th birthday. You do that with a Fender or a Les Paul or any other thing, and you leave it up in a
it's warped, and
that neck is going to be like this.
Yeah. For sure.
And I've talked with people who have had water damage on their instruments. Their basement got flooded, and the guitar was down there for 2 or 3 days. The electronics were bad. They had to disassemble the trem and clean that a little bit, but they came back and it was good as new.
Yeah.
Funny story. One of the worst I've ever seen about bridge corrosion was. You guys remember Guar? Does anybody remember the band Guar?
Absolutely, yeah. Vomit, blood, and piss everywhere.
You don't remember Guar? They came out in the 90s, and basically they were. Just go to YouTube, look up Guar, and watch a concert, and it will explain itself very quickly. But they are more of an act than a band.
Yeah.
About the experience, and so one of the founding members of that, their bass player Michael Bishop, got in touch with me because he had a bunch of bridges that were in bad shape, and he said, I got like 4 or 5 of these because I've had to get replacements on tour and all that stuff. He wasn't in the band anymore, and the reason he had a Steinberger was because they had so many people in outfits running around on stage and everything that his bass kept getting knocked out of tune with a headstock, and so he's like, I wanted to get a bass without a headstock, and they ended up. And if you watch the Guar videos, especially old ones, you'll see his bass doesn't look like a bass. It's got a piece of meat that got fitted on the thing. But he sent me these bridges, and they were so crusty. It was horrible.
Right.
I was able to take about 5 or 6 bridges and assemble, I think, 2 fully working bridges for him.
Oh, wow.
But that's because when you watch those videos, he said they went through about 40 gallons of fake blood a night, throwing it around on everything.
They were awesome. I loved them. Yeah.
It's a trip. So there was that. The only other, like I said, I think I had the good fortune of buying a bunch of trems off Reeves Cabrels at one point because he would go through them from just hand sweat.
Yeah.
And I think he said they'd last about 4 to 6 weeks on tour when he was in Tin Machine. And but then he'd get new trems from the factory and just swap them out and do that. And I was able to kind of, again, assemble a bunch of parts out of those into working trems. So really, aside from the hardware, as long as you take care of it, put it away, dry it, it'll last forever. The one thing I will mention is, although the necks seem like they'll never move, there are times where they will bow. And I mentioned the phenolic. The interesting thing about phenolic, it's hydroscopic, but it also doesn't have memory. So wood, if it bends, it'll want to bend back. You know, a tree branch, you bend it, it'll want to go back to shape. Phenolic won't. And so if it gets too much moisture or too much humidity, heat for an extended period of time, that neck, what tends to happen is the phenolic is moving at a different rate than the underlying neck. And if it gets enough that it kind of pops and releases, Now the whole fretboard won't pop off, but the neck will bow. And when it goes to that bow, it won't come back.
Mm.
And so unfortunately, and Jeff will probably corroborate this, unfortunately, sometimes the only thing that you can do on that is sometimes sand out that bow, forward bow or back bow.
Yeah.
You can do a little bit with frets and plex now, but sometimes the only thing to do is kind of what commonly call a heat set. They'll put heat on that fingerboard. They'll put tension on the neck. They'll put it back in space. They'll then take the heat off, and it will cool. And that fretboard will be like rock solid on that.
Right. Nice. So there's always help.
There is help. The only challenge though is that on a Steinberger you can't replace the fingerboard. It's on a heat set. You got to be careful. I've talked to 2 luthiers that have replaced fingerboards on a Steinberger, and they said they never do it again.
Right.
Because they either had to sand it off or they had to mill it off. These were basically, the fingerboard was molded with the neck at the same time. And so it's not glued on. You can't remove it that way. And when you do, you kind of see all that stuff underneath. It's a mess. It's not like the regular guitar neck.
It's almost kind of welded itself together. And that's
yeah. So the thing that I always tell people is be careful who you send your guitar to. Because one thing over the life of these instruments is that the average guitar tech is just going to pop the frets, and if there's a little bit of bow or whatever, he's going to sand it down, and then he's going to pop the frets back in, and that's what they do. The problem is if they sand too much and go crazy on that, they'll keep taking off layers and layers and layers. And unfortunately, you get to the point where replacing the neck is more expensive than just buying a new guitar.
Right.
You don't have new guitars. And so that's why Headless USA and Jeff and those are really important, because they know those things. There are things that they can do, tweaks that they can do, with the frets and all that, but try and be minimally invasive when you're doing the work on these. I've talked to people that had, their local tech do it, and he just sand it like crazy to get it good. Did that 3 or 4 times. The next thing you know, your dot markers are coming through on the sides, and there's not enough left on the neck to go ahead and do any more refrets on it.
Right. Yeah.
So I would tell people, just be careful on that and who you've got doing your work, because the average guy might be able to, but if they're not cognizant of the fact that you just can't pop a new fretboard on it, then it's just the approach on those things.
Yeah. I've always said that if this one needs a refret, it's going to Jeff. So.
Yeah. No, Jeff. Jeff worked at the factory. I think he started as just on the assembly line, and then ended up he was the production manager before they moved the plant to Nashville. And so Jeff is probably I don't know how many guitars he's seen in his lifetime, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend get the work done through that.
Well, talking about seeing lots of guitars, what else do you have back behind there?
Again, we'll go through these a little bit. Again, I'm a bass player, not a guitarist, but
I've been seeing that one sitting over there.
This is number 1766.
Wow.
So this is an early production GL with the hardtail.
Mm-hmm.
They've got the EMGs.
Do you have the leg rest for it? It's just not on it?
I do. I've got those. And actually, oddly enough, I do make reproductions of these. I've got to actually send some to Natalie.
Oh, okay.
So she has them. They have different ones here. There were 3 different inserts that they made over production time, and those get lost more than they break. But
so could you get one of those? No, I guess not. I was going to say, could you retrofit a Trans-trem on it? But no.
Not on the hardtail.
It was one of those things. If I bought this for $500, I'd think about it, but I would never touch it. Doing that these days, you could. You'd have to mill down here. You just need to cut on the sides here on the faceplate to get that done. But I wouldn't. Probably the only thing I would ever entertain on this is if I ever wanted to put a track tuner on it. But even then, my goal on this is to leave it as is.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that one.
Very nice.
We've got pulled out a Synapse. So if you guys never saw these were during the MusicYo days. This is the trans scale.
Mm-hmm.
version, which basically is a baritone neck.
And we lost the focus on your camera there.
Yeah, why is my thing just doing focus? So we'll do this and then come back. Why is it not focusing? There we go. Don't get close. So yeah, so this is kind
She
of.
said. Sorry.
There you go. You know my wife. So, but they this is kind of Ned's next generation of a kind of, I don't want to say version 2, but it was these were made in Korea. The synapses were, so they were a little bit higher quality. They had guitars and basses instead of the guitars. The GL guitars, the balance isn't a problem on those, so they just have the strap buttons. On the XLs, they do have that pivot plate.
Right.
So this was kind of the strap extension was kind of a way to move that out like a normal strap. So
balance it out a bit. So what's the actual scale on that guitar then?
Good question. I'm not sure.
Okay, so where would E position be?
So E position is going to be here. So you're 2 frets up.
Okay.
One of my quibbles on this, because the weird thing on this is, if you look at the dot markers on the front, the dot markers on the side are different.
Uh-oh.
So the dot markers on the side are actually 2 positions up.
Okay. Well, there has to be a reason for that.
The idea was that he wanted to do it where if you're in baritone but tune this to E, you'd still be able to do it. I've always challenged Ned on that one. That was one that I kind of didn't get. I'm like, just keep it normal and just do the dot, the extra dot for where kind of the 0 fret, the fret would be, and do that. But these have that rolling capo on them. On that.
Now, how easy is it to move that capo while you're playing?
You can do it. It's not a problem. You can adjust the tension on these. And so it's got a little, if you actually pull it off, there's like a little indentation in the headpiece, so it kind of sits there.
Okay.
So you just, comes right up.
So we got to hear somebody play Summer Nights on that.
Not me.
No.
I'm not a guitarist. So, so there's that. Next up, since it's TransTrem Thursday.
Oh, look at there. TransTrem
Look at
bass.
that. There we go.
So yeah,
I have never seen one of these.
So yeah, they and
Nice.
I can
Elusive,
switch
but
to the
captured.
other camera here real quick. I can see if I can slide it under here.
Oh, look at there. Super sweet.
So yeah, so actually these were made in between the time of the Type 1 and the Type 2 TransTrem. So it kind of it has some elements of both of them.
First thing that I notice is that the balls are turned sideways.
Well, that's because the ball end on a bass string is much larger. And
So
what
is
these
there
do-
a pin that it goes on? I see.
Yeah, you see
Okay.
the pin?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a pin that's a hardened steel here. It's extra hardened that holds that pin because this thing's been under tension for 30 years and that pin hasn't snapped off. So
Wow.
they definitely engineered these. So it's got that, and then it's obviously got the adjustment on the top here. Unfortunately, nobody makes calibrated bass strings anymore.
Yep. Yep.
So this is set up for just 2 positions, but the mechanism's exactly the same. This does have the spring coming out the back, so you've got that there. You can see where the adjustment is, but these, yeah.
So here's a challenging question for you. Give us one song that was recorded that used a TransTrem bass.
I don't know if there is one.
Right?
Honestly, I don't know if there is one.
Do you know any famous bass artists that have used that particular bass?
Nobody that I'm aware of. If you want to hear something funny, because I've had access to the logs. This bass was owned by one of the Nelson brothers. Do you remember the Nelsons?
Yeah.
So this was owned by one of them.
Wow.
I didn't buy it with any kind of celebrity, authenticity on that stuff. But then when I looked back at the serial number and who it was sold to, it said, I think it was Gunnar Nelson. So this had to play some of that.
Get it on the cheap then.
Hair metal music. I don't think they were playing TransTrem tunes.
Yeah. No.
So they but yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those things that it's more. I will say it's it's a little weird to be playing. You're not playing chords.
Mm-hmm.
If I noodle on this, I probably do more kind of fretless licks, where I'll bend up to a note or out of a note.
Right.
A little bit more. These they only made, I think total, they made 120 or 140 bass trans-trems. Some were XL, some were XMs, a few XQs, but yeah.
That's awesome. I've never, I mean, I've seen pictures of it, but I've never seen that bridge up close like that. That's very, very cool.
You hearing that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
There it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can go crazy on it.
That's cool.
But it's just, it was one of those things that never really took off, for obvious reasons, just because of.
Well, it's one of those that, I mean, if you're Ned Steinberger, it's like, why not? Let's do it. So that's super cool.
It's fun to noodle on. Utilities a little on the odd side,
Mm-hmm.
but you got that. Again, we're kind of getting into the basses for me. Probably I'll pull out some of my favorite basses. These are kind of unique ones. This is a single pickup.
Oh yeah. Look at that.
Oh, wow.
So they only made, I think, 15 of these.
Oh, wow.
Everything was 2 pickups. So
Now, I'm sorry, what is that on the back? It almost looks like a brace.
Oh, now we're going to get to that. So, like I said, I can talk for hours. We'll be here all night, guys.
We got all night.
Who's not familiar with the Steinberger basses? It's one of those things that if you hold this bass, a guitar isn't so bad, but on a bass, it's got the neck is cantilevering more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it wants to dip. And so what Ned devised was the pivot plate.
Right.
So the pivot plate is there, and it basically moves the bass. If you're even on the XP basses, I don't own any XPs because my complaint on those is always the same. And I'll stand up here. Is it when you're doing this, it wants to dip, but it moves the bass this way.
Mm-hmm.
And you really want to have more access this way.
Right.
With your fingers. And so it that way you're not reaching for these last frets so much.
Right.
And so that's kind of the idea of the pivot plate. And so one of the things that Ned did, and this is where, Ned's always thinking and always using his old designs, is that for his cellos and the basses, some of those people wanted to be mobile. And so what he did is he created basically Pivot Plate 2.0. And this is called the NS Boomerang.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
And so it's basically just a pivot plate that's boiled down to its essential components.
Mm-hmm.
I had to do this because this bass didn't have a pivot plate when I bought it. It's hard to find repros. So I'm like, oh, we'll try that. And what's nice on this is that one of the interesting things is some people on the pivot plates, one of the complaints is it wants to tip forward.
Mm-hmm.
With this, because the arms move, you can actually tip the bass like this.
Oh, wow.
That's exaggerated, but if you don't want it pointing away from you too much, you can actually rotate the arms, and then you got that.
Just puts it right in the exact spot that you need. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Very cool.
So, but I put those on a few. One of the things this has is strings that are hard to find, exposed core.
I see that.
The original Steinberger strings were made by Rotosound, and they were exposed core.
Huh.
And I was fortunate to find somebody in the UK that made those. It changes how, guitar strings and bass strings are a little different. As you add windings to a bass string, it gets less flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And so with those strings, it's a little more flexible. I actually have used those. I have those on. I've got an L that has a synth built in, and the triggering on those is really nice. So
I see a real quick question here.
Yeah.
Let's see. I can't even say Zen Gestri Trio. What did Andy mean? No bass calibrated string anymore, only set up for 2 positions. Please elaborate.
So with the TransTrem, the calibrated strings allow you to go through the entire range because it puts that, the ball end gets put in that precise spot, knowing that it's locked at the headpiece end. If you don't have calibrated strings, you can still use those strings on any TransTrem. The challenge is that you can only set 2 positions to be correct. So basically floating and one other position.
Mm-hmm.
So you can set those 2 positions. Everything else is going to be off. And that's true on, like I said, on any TransTrem with any, even if you used an adapter or regular strings or something. So you can still get one other position to be in there, but that's just a function of getting all the positions requires the string to be that precise length. So if it's not, then you do that. And the challenge is that I think the Dario for a time was making their bass strings calibrated, and they stopped. Really, the only company that ever made them was Labella.
Right.
And they just stopped because there's only, like I said, 120, 140 bass TransTrems.
Yeah.
And limited market.
The market is just not there. Yeah.
And then, so I've got 2 of these. This is actually what we term a wide 5-string bass. Nowadays 5 strings are pretty ubiquitous, but in the 80s and 90s they weren't so much.
Right.
This was a later Gibson construct. Steinberger never made a true wider 5-string. In the early days, it was actually they took a 5-string. They basically took the 4-string width and then made 5 strings into it. So we call that a narrow 5.
Right.
I don't have a narrow 5 out. So that's most of the L's and the XMs that you see are actually a narrow 5. Guitarists love those, by the way. I say double on bass because the strings are a little closer for them. But it was only in the last couple years that they decided to kind of retool and start making actual wide 5 strings. And they only made maybe, I think, 60 of them.
Oh, wow.
So, especially because 5 strings are so ubiquitous these days, these are
Very
highly
rare.
collectible. I had a yellow one of these, which was a one-of-a-kind color. Sold it for a pretty penny just because it was so collectible.
Mm-hmm.
And another one of these.
Nice.
This is an unlined fretless wide 5 with
Very nice.
nylon bass strings. So it's one of those. This is one of the sweeter sounding instruments, and I hope the batteries are still good in this one. No, batteries.
Oh, well.
Sorry.
Next time.
But,
Next time.
Yeah, but this is one of the sweeter ones again, and these nylon tape wound strings make it sound more kind of like an upright. So
Very cool. How many Steinbergers do you have, Andy?
If my wife would answer this, too many. I've bought and sold a lot over the years. I mean, I collect probably.
There's a
25.
culpability thing here, so just say you have a few.
I have a few. I have them insured too. So.
Did you say 25 about?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
about 25 of them.
There was a question.
I'm not the biggest collector either.
Yeah.
There are a couple of guys out there that own, well, actually more than that, because one of them I know, Todd Hogarth, he's got tons of GM1s, but there are a couple of other guys out there. One of the collectors I know, he actually has both of. There are only 2. She's going to show her double neck here, GM double neck, but there are actually 2 GL double necks in existence. One gentleman kept asking him to build them, and they wouldn't because they said it was just going to be a pain. And then he found out that Gary Pill, who was playing for Boston at the time, he was Sammy Hagar's guitarist in his band. He ordered a double neck with a TransTrem and a track tuner. And when he saw that, he wanted one. And so he ordered one with actually 2 track tuner or two TransTrems on it. So, and eventually Gary Pill sold that one, and that collector bought that one. So one guy owns both of the GL doubles that are out there.
Spread the wealth, guy. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Got a question for you from James Bridges. Are there big differences between the Moses necks versus Steinberger necks?
Yes. And that's one of those things where you think it's composite and they all kind of come out the same, but they are different. The construction of them is kind of different, kind of the approach to constructing them. The Moses neck doesn't have the gel coat on the outside. Internally is constructed a little differently. Steve Mosier, who owned Moses Graphite and started it. He wanted to design a neck that sounded a little woodier. The Steinberger neck, and one of the things you guys, you talk about the clarity and all that stuff, but there's an evenness to it. And that was part of Ned's design, was it's kind of transparent.
Yep.
And so when you look at a guitar through an oscilloscope, you get an upscoop in the mids, and that's the wood normally.
Yep.
And so a Steinberger is fairly flat. That's why sometimes people say it's sterile or it doesn't have bite. It doesn't have that kind of upscoop in the mids. Moses specifically designed their necks to have an upscoop in the mids. The Steinberger necks that Moses made are a little flatter than the Moses one was, because Ned got involved and worked with Steve Mosier to kind of do a few things. They're a little stiffer because they needed to be stiffer on the Trans-trem side.
Right.
Kind of the interesting backstory of that is actually the Moses necks that you find on the Steinbergers through MusicYo, that neck originally was a Klein guitar neck. Klein Guitars was an offshoot. Are you guys interested in the Klein guitar story at all?
Absolutely.
Again, I could talk forever on this stuff. I've had 23 years to amass the info.
Well, we have many
Taking notes, but I don't
more.
have to because it's being put on YouTube.
We have many more Thursdays to come as well.
There
So
you go. I'll save some. The Klein
Welcome
project
guest.
came about from everybody. When I started collecting, everybody's like, "Oh, Steinberger went to crap when Gibson bought him out." The truth is that actually Steinberger had most of the really good stuff out of Newburgh came after the Gibson buyout, because Gibson had interest and money, and so they were able to get more staff and more production equipment and all of that. One of the things they did is they introduced Ned to some other folks, and one of them was Steve Klein. And so they collaborated. Steve had this Headless, and if you've seen the Klein, it's got this ergonomic body, similar to the Strandberg now. And so they got together. The original idea was that Steinberger would basically take care of all the production. Steve would just design it. It would go from there. They were so busy making all their other guitars that they couldn't do it. So Steve set up his operation in California, and they would ship him necks and parts. And then he would have the bodies made, and then they would ship them out to dealers. Over time, Steve tired of that, and so he handed that off to his second lieutenant on that, which was Lorenzo German, who then bought out the company, and that became Klein Electric Guitars. And he continued to make that and continued to get parts and everything from Steinberger. When they moved to Nashville around 92, they had some issues with getting production up and running, because the only people who made the move to Nashville were an accountant and a couple of finishing people. None of the production people involved in the fabrication moved to Nashville. So they had a lot of quality problems trying to get that going down there.
Yep.
And Lorenzo was kind of tired of those, and so he found Moses and he worked on that. Well, Moses didn't have a headless neck, so Lorenzo German carved a prototype neck that then Moses used as the mold to make the molds for everything, and that became the Klein Electric neck. Continued problems with Moses and supply and all that. He started going with rosewood necks at the end of their production, solid rosewood, just because you didn't need reinforcement and everything for the Trans-trem. But interestingly enough, when Epiphone started Steinberger production again, they went to Moses. Well, they decided, we've got a headless neck that we can give you, which had already been on headless guitars already. That profile was the Klein Electric profile that they used.
Gotcha.
They didn't have to do any R&D really, and aside from some tweaks, like I said before, that Ned gave them on some stiffness and that, those are the same. They have a different tone. The composite is different. The fingerboard is completely different. There isn't a separate fingerboard. It's actually like all one continuous, like the epoxy for everything.
Right.
It's together on that. There are some issues occasionally with truss rods failing on those. And that's a problem because they were put in before they were fabricated. So you really can't fix the truss rod problem on those.
Right.
But yeah, so they sound a little different. I will put an asterisk on this. There are also a few guitars out there that have a different neck than Moses that came out of MusicYo. At the end of production, and the name of the company is escaping me right now. Do you remember what it was, Natalie. There was Fibersonics was the company. At the time, they were making some parts for Fender. There were some Fender composite bodies out there at the time, and so they reached out to this company that had factories in Asia to make some necks for them. And so this was right at the end of production, and so I'd have to ask. We've got a gentleman, Bernd Meisner, who's learned as much as I have on this stuff, and has a website, Headless Europe, who knows a little bit more about this. But I want to say maybe 100 or so of those necks ended up making their way out. And you guys had mentioned about, could they restart this again? One of the things that's tough right now is that there isn't a whole lot of composite construction out there for musical instruments. The suppliers. When Ned did it, there was nowhere to get this stuff made, so he had to do it. And you would think now with all these fabricators, there'd be more people out there making composite necks. I will show you guys one thing here. When they were starting production again, one of the things I tried to convince them to do was, this is a neck from Status Graphite.
Mm-hmm.
This was a one-off that they made and they tested down in Nashville, and it's got that woven weave, the 3D weave.
Yep.
So they made these. They made this and tested it out. Couldn't go with it because it was too expensive to use these necks. These are more similar. This neck is almost identical in performance to the original Steinberger neck, because Rob Green basically got his idea from that and started to make his necks the same way. So, but with woven.
As you were tapping on that, I could hear that.
Well, here's
echo.
You dig that
let's
carbon
do this.
fiber
Let's
look.
do
It's
this.
pretty cool.
You'll do. You hear that?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Now this is a smaller piece. I'm gonna grab. Let me grab a Moses neck.
Andy keeps grabbing stuff for everywhere. He's got stuff all over the place.
How many does he have under the
six
desk?
string bass neck. But can you hear how it's kind of lower pitch?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit, the difference in those. That's that one. Do I have? I think I've got a Steinberger neck here.
I know who I'm calling if I need some parts.
Whereabouts are you located?
So here's a bass neck, but you're gonna. So you got that one, a little lower at the base, and then you got that one's a little deader.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, that's the tap test.
Hello,
What is it?
Pizza.
Fred Garvin.
Very, very cool stuff, Andy.
Yeah, I think that's. Let me close the door back here. So sorry about that. I have this stuff everywhere.
Oh, that's
Nah.
very cool.
And
That's awesome.
people probably wonder
It's a
why do you have
magic
all this
closet.
stuff. Why do you have this stuff all nearby? Part of it is because when we have questions that come up on the internet, what do I need? I'll show you.
There we
My
go. The
Blanco
visuals are on
screws,
point.
because they just want, questions on things. So I have headpieces here. I've got, if somebody's having a bass bridge problem, it's like, okay, I got a bass bridge here. I can look at it, see what the problem is. Grab it, just, where is it? What else? Just lots of little things that I keep here handy, because when people have problems, I don't want to have to dig out completely to go, okay, where's this piece of hardware and what problem are they having, and doing that. So, and I'm a bit of a pack rat.
Very cool. Very cool that you got all that stuff
all
and you're
good
sharing
stuff.
it with us tonight. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to ask Natalie, because I am dying to see these guitars that she
What you
has.
got in the bag?
Okay, I have the
What's-
double neck.
What's in the box? What's in the box?
See this.
Okay. So here's the double neck.
Dun, dun, dun.
And Andy can tell you guys more about the 12-string track tuner. If you feel
Now,
up to it.
I understand that the 12-string track tuner has a little, wheel that you can move to each string.
So it's dirty. This is not restored yet. So this is the double neck. And
Very, very
has
cool.
2 different bridges on it. And Ned actually showed me how this one works. So you actually pull it and move it
Look at that.
to tune each string.
So Natalie, put it in your lap like you're gonna play it.
It's huge,
I'm just trying to imagine Ryan for our shows with one of those.
right?
There's
Now-
one issue. There's one issue with it. It does have a crack in the back.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I see that, right? Where the bodies are joined together.
We're gonna have to strip it completely down, repair it, and then repaint. New gel coat, repaint
Wow.
it.
So what type of body is that? What is that made of? Do you know, Andy?
That'd be hard maple. For most of the production, and especially the Newbergs, they went with hard maple. Ned's he's got an affinity for hard maple. Just likes the clarity of it, the attack. And so they almost all of those would be maple.
Very nice. And you said this is a customer's guitar that you're restoring, or this is one that you have?
This is one that I just bought.
You just bought it. Okay.
Yep. And it has 2 different configurations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very cool.
Awesome.
that's awesome.
Can you let me know first when that one goes up for sale?
Yeah. I'll either sell it as is, or I'll put the effort into fixing the body.
Now,
What you do is sell it to Ryan and then just give it to, and Ryan will take it from there.
what is the value on one of those guitars?
You know,
As is right now.
with the double neck, I don't know. I really don't know. There's just
Well-
too few. There's
Well, you
too
bought
few to.
You know something.
Yeah, but she won't tell you how much.
Yeah, but that's what she paid for it. That's not what it's worth.
I asked,
Oh,
I
that's
asked him
30
how much
bucks.
he wanted to sell it to me for, and he gave me a number, and I wrote him
And
a check.
there you go.
There
There
you
you go. Well, if it's got double the necks, then it must be double the price. But no, it's very, very nice. I've always wondered how that worked for the 12 string because I always saw that one knob. I'm like, well, how do you tune the thing?
It's such an awesome concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, that's killer.
So what
Reminds
was
me
this?
of Eddie's double neck purple there,
Yeah.
live without a net, or
I think he was
I can show
baritone.
you guys something here. I'm digging in my archive because that knob thing is kind of interesting.
Oh, look at here.
So
Oh, awesome.
And
That
he's got
Yeah.
the diagrams and the pictures. Look at
that
this.
looks
yeah, so
really
the inside of it,
complex.
just those are the jaws. You know, they're sideways,
Mhm.
and then it's just it slides on a track, and there's like a little ball bearing, and you slide it out, and then you slide it over, and there's if I don't think I have the picture of the top of it. This is what the jaws look like.
That's just so simple. You're like, why didn't somebody else think of that?
Yeah, and the other side of it has indentation, so when you slide it, you can hear that click.
That
when she's
click.
moving it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it's got that click on everything, and so that's how you get kind of the one knob, because otherwise those knobs would be too small and you couldn't turn them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was ingenious.
Brilliant.
That's amazing.
If you see Peter Gabriel on tour, his
Saw him
guitarist
on
David
Saturday.
Rhodes still plays a Steinberger 12 string on In
What
Your
happened
Eye.
there?
It's
Yeah,
not me.
There we go.
and
I saw him on Saturday.
but
Peter
yeah,
Gabriel.
so did you see him when he was playing his GL?
Yeah, oh yeah. I was focused on Levin for the most part because
Tony
Yeah.
Levin, yeah.
he's a killer. But yeah, he's a good
Being
player.
a bass
man.
player, you must.
Yeah, so but
Like
David
that.
Rhodes has played a GL in concert with Peter Gabriel forever. He's one of the few guitarists that still tours with him.
John.
He's sold most of his collection, but he still keeps that GL12 to play on a couple of songs.
Very nice.
He buys
Very cool.
he buys so many strings from us before the tour.
Awesome.
No bet.
It's a good show if you guys are into it. It's well worth seeing.
Yeah.
And you had a blue one, another one, Natalie?
I have one more. So this is a transparent blue. It's not fretless. It just has a fret protector on it. You can take a look at that.
That is
has a-
dirty.
Wow.
That is nice.
So did you guys re-top that, or that was the existing top?
So, this one I didn't actually have my hands on that much. Jason, who works here, actually was working directly with the customer. This is
Okay.
not one that I own. So I actually didn't. This is one I actually didn't get to see the before, so I can't
Can you see
really.
the headpiece?
I wish I actually saw the before.
You see the headpiece? That is so that I can't tell if that's an original. That doesn't look like a Moses neck.
Oh, the neck. Yeah.
I was just looking at the headpiece. Does it have a
Yeah.
serial number on it?
Yeah, it's a Newberg.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So.
Very cool.
I
Love
wish
that
I knew what
color.
it looked like before, but the color's awesome.
Yeah.
So the pickups have been changed in that, it looks like. That would have had EMGs in it, correct?
Yeah, he customized the pickups. So.
Very cool. Very nice.
Which is something that I'll add for everybody, because one of the things that we always get
Amazing.
questions on was, it's got weird pickups or it's got this pickup switch somewhere, and they're always like, "Oh, was that factory custom?"
Mm-hmm.
And we know that everybody tweaks their guitars all the time,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, nobody thinks that the other guitar was tweaked. We tweak our stuff, but I get tons of questions on what did they come from the factory with Seymour Duncan's? Not Newberg, no.
Yeah.
So,
No.
Now, speaking of pickups, I'd like to hear your
Bartolini
take
sometimes.
on why EMG was the perfect fit.
Well,
Especially
I
being
will-
a bass player, of course, you're not opposed to having the active pickups.
I'll do another plug here. There's a gentleman by the name of Jim Riley who's an author. He's actually written 3 books. One on Emmett Chapman, who made it stick. He wrote a book, I think 2 years ago, on Ned.
Wow,
Mm-hmm.
cool.
It talks about this, and then he just released this book maybe a month or 2 ago on Rob Turner and EMG. And the interesting story about that is that really they kind of came of age at the same time.
Right.
Ned originally had high impedance MusicYo pickups that they were putting in the basses, and they really weren't happy with those. EMG was just kind of getting started, and then when they talked, they just kind of gelled. They were both seeing these things the same way. Active pickups were not common in 1980, and the whole concept of them was kind of foreign, and so there was kind of, it's new technology. And when Rob and Ned got together, they just kind of, saw they had similar
Synergy.
visions for what they were trying to do, and it worked really well. And so, at that point, then they just started putting EMGs, and they started running off the shelves with all their basses. That helped EMG get noticed.
Some traction, yeah.
And so they both kind of helped each other in that regard. And Ned and Rob are still, friends to this day and still work together. This NS has, you probably can't see it, but it's got pickups here that are custom. The 6-string isn't. The 5 strings are actually curved.
Mm-hmm.
But they need the curved top to it.
The pickup itself is curved.
Yeah, the top of the pickup is actually curved.
Wow.
If you see the picture of the fin in that article about it, the PHIN, that has a pickup it's a large soap bar.
Mm-hmm.
It actually has multiple coils in it. It looks like 3 humbuckers put together.
Right.
And EMG custom designed that. It's got different coils, and you can do different switching and all those kinds of things.
Wow.
If you look at Ned's uprights, those have like these little circular pickups. Those are custom designed by EMG.
Yeah.
And so they came of age at the same time, and people got used to it. The pickups have a clarity to them
Mm-hmm.
that just matched really well. Some questions you get is, do I have 81s? Do I have 85s? Do I have 60s in mine? You can look at the foil. That tells you a little bit. But they used all different configurations. If we get to talk to Ned, those are questions that Ned knows nothing about. Just because he wasn't involved in assembly like that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so they might have made a bunch of them with, 89s, with a bunch with, like I said, some of them had 60s in them. They did some custom stuff. Even the, let me find if I have one here. Now you're going to see this and laugh, but I save it just for reference. You had the XP basses and the GP guitars, which had, and again, I save this for posterity. They've got the logo, the EMG logo is normally in the corner, but
Mm-hmm.
these are in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Oh, interesting.
These are a high impedance pickup. They're not active.
Gotcha.
And that was done because Steinberger, the P series was designed as kind of an economy brand. It didn't turn out that way, but they were trying to make a lower price product, and so they decided to make a low impedance pickup. Basically, this pickup is the first kind of EMG Select pickup, the first IMG that they ever made, and then they kind of took that design and ran with it for other things. So yeah, they're still tight. I mentioned a while back that I got a chance to have lunch with Rob and Ned together and talk about that. So it was funny. But yeah, they're still tight in that regard.
Right.
The Synapse that I showed you, EMG not only made the pickups, they designed these kind of these pickup holders. Did you see them? So they're not exposed.
Okay.
They've got these little tabs on them.
Okay.
Those,
Yeah.
those are actual humbuckers. That tab is not part of the pickup.
So
It's
that
just a little cover.
mounts down.
Cradle, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah. So you can route everything entirely, but this kind of sits up there. And then they also custom design the electronics. This has a piezo bridge. It's a single piece piezo, and but EMG designed the electronics in the Synapse for everything.
Wow.
So yeah, and I think they're working on electronics now as well.
Right.
So.
Well, like I've said before, anybody that has played this guitar that I've got, their first thing where can I get one of these? Where can I get it? So I think that it's something that would be very, very popular again if it were made. So
You're right.
Yeah.
Do they ever comment on the weight?
Then what's that?
The weight? I said, do they ever comment on the weight?
Yeah, they're kind of surprised that it's not lighter than what they were expecting. It's deceptive. When you look at the size of this little thing here, you would think it would be featherweight. And it's not heavy, but it is weightier than what you would think that it would be. So yeah, most people say, "Oh, that's a little heavier than I thought." Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Part of that is by design.
Yeah.
And that comes from the bass side of things because Ned realized he was making prototypes and he made an ultralight prototype and it sounded horrible, had no sustain, had no tone. And he basically clamped it to a workbench he had, and all this tone and all this sustain came out. And he realized that, at least on the bass side,
more mass. Yeah.
Mass is important. So his idea on the Steinberger was to take the mass of a regular bass, but put it in a smaller package. So that Steinberger blend is dense. That's why other composite necks sometimes from a weight standpoint are much lighter and cause an issue. You have somebody like Parker that went, guitar you can get away with much lighter because the strings are much lighter.
Right.
And Parker kind of took that to the kind of the, I don't want to say extreme, but
the other end of the spectrum. Yeah.
To be super light. I'm not sure on the fin where I would expect the mass on that to be a little lighter, because the guitar doesn't need to be that massive.
But on the basses, he wanted to get that thunder.
Yeah, and some of it is mass, some of it is stiffness too. Ned over time, as I've talked with him on things, he realized that stiffness is important. Where did I put the trims? The ZT3 trem, this is actually cast aluminum.
Okay.
And you would think that, it's light, it doesn't sound good, but stiffness matters. And so aluminum is stiffer than steel, and especially brass and other things that we always think of as bridge material. And because of that, Ned has kind of evolved his thought a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if the fin is a little lighter weight. The bass too might be able to be a little lighter weight, but I've played composite basses that are super light, and they usually don't sound so great. Don't
sound as good.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, we are 10 minutes past our 2-hour mark. I'm sure that we could continue to talk for several hours, and I would be happy to sit here and do it, but maybe save some for next time. So we'll go ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys. I can talk for hours, as you can tell, on this stuff.
No, man, this has been great. This has been fantastic.
Education.
The lack of information that really, unless you really go and dig for different, this is phenomenal to get this information out. People can access it, see it, refer back to it. This is just awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the format. Like I said, my goal with this has always been learn the knowledge and share it. So
Would love to have you back.
part of my
We
goal.
certainly appreciate it.
I'd
We
love
would
to be
love
back.
we would
Yeah.
love to have you come back and maybe talk Ned into coming on. That would be
I will.
fantastic.
Open
I will.
invitation for sure.
I don't know what his bedtime is.
We can adjust the start time to
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
he likes. Yeah, for
but
sure.
I will talk with him. Yeah, he's usually very accommodating on some of these
Yep.
things. So
I
will-
mean, there's so many questions that I would like to ask.
Yeah.
Based on, you've kind of touched on some of it, but where did you come up with the idea? How many calculations did you have? Just all these kind of things that just, like I said, the design behind this thing just continues to blow my mind. So
just make sure you have your Advil ready, because I've had discussions with Ned at the individual level on this when they were
And
designing the GT3.
it starts to twist your
There
brain a
were a
little
few
bit.
phone calls. My brain was hurting afterwards.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, okay, this. Brain.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Natalie, thank you for coming on. Did you have anything else to share with us, or?
Have one
No,
thing, didn't you?
One of my favorite parts was seeing the inside of the neck. That was awesome.
Oh, that was
Yes.
awesome.
Cross
Yep.
section was
I
amazing.
feel like
Yeah,
that could
Absolutely.
be an Andy museum.
Well, I mean, yeah, we had asked about that, and you said that there was actually wood in the neck. You got the answer for us, and for you to have a piece of it to show us that was
From
just
both
that was
angles,
phenomenal.
right?
Yeah,
Front cross section
absolutely.
and side cross section.
So-
Fantastic.
Very cool, man.
So I think that let's wrap things up. Should I do it, John? Should I do it
You have to. There's
Have to?
no ifs, ands, or buts about it, brother.
for TransTrem Thursday? All right, let's do it. Let's see. Let me get over here. Get
Probably
set
one of
up
the best
here.
Trans-trem songs ever written.
So this is what you can do with a TransTrem guitar. Obviously Eddie did it, and I'm copying it, but I think this is just some of the coolest stuff that you can do with guitar.
Yeah.
Wasn't my best, but
Never
we
gets
we
old,
did
that
it.
one.
Talking about a hot summer night, baby.
Yep, the hot
nice,
summer
man.
nights are ending, but we got them going on here. So appreciate everybody coming out, everybody in the chat. Sorry I couldn't say hello to everybody in the chat. There's so many of you, but had a great show. A lot of information from Andy,
Class
Natalie.
was in session.
We were in session, so hopefully we get to do this again soon. Share some more information. Loved having you here, Andy. Natalie, you're always welcome.
Oh,
And,
still muted. I'll unmute him. Oh, can't unmute him because he muted himself.
Who muted himself?
Andy.
Oh, Andy did. He's giving us thumbs up. He must be on the phone or something. So again, thank you to everybody for coming out. Everybody in the chat. Awesome, awesome, awesome stuff. Let me get over here. We're going to start wrapping things up. We'll do this one here. And we will thank some of the last people here that were in the chat. Let's see, we had, scroll up a little bit. Hip Metal Works hung out for the whole night. Cecil Music, Keith Campbell, right on. Sky Prop, Boner Jams is still here. That must be when the 12 string came out.
All right.
James Bridges, let's see, Hip Metal Works. Appreciate everybody hanging out for the night. Patty Dill, right on. Good to see you. Thank you.
See ya, Patty.
Absolutely. Sky Prop says great show. Right on. Smallmouth Guy. Blue Mox. Thanks for the show. TC all. So we will see everyone. We will be back for Sunday Chat and Jam. What's that, Trev?
Rock Daddy still in the house.
Rock Daddy still there? Right on.
Right on, man.
Nelson's still here. Appreciate all you guys. We will see everyone next time. See everybody on Sunday for Chat and Jam. And then we'll be back again next week for TransTrem Thursday. So everybody keep in mind that we do have that petition. Look underneath in the description, underneath the video. Please click that. All you got to do is sign it. You can actually make a small contribution that helps to push it out. You don't have to do that if you don't want. Just get us a signature. We're going to try to get as many as we can and see what we can do to push Gibson to maybe bring the Steinberger back. You never know what can happen, right? So, all right.
We're like Andy Dufresne, keep writing letters and letters until
All right.
finally get.
Let me turn this down a little bit. There we go. All right, so we will see everyone next time. And until then, some wise advice.
Eddie Van Halen here, telling you, keep playing, man. Gotta keep playing. It's the only thing there is. Music, man. Keep playing. All right? I'm gonna come looking for you if you don't.
See everybody next time.